Hi everyone. Let me regulate everything. I like to see you all. Congratulations. And we're going to talk about modeling and influence of security checks throughout the life cycle of code development. Well, I am Alexey Smirnov. We do composition analysis, the first composition analysis, conferences, presentations, that's what I do. Code analysis, and you can talk to me about secure development, about process improvement, products. Last year, I told you about the problem of transitive dependencies. Let's go to open source analysis. And you will see a lot of interesting observations. These are the key ones. It's all about how much time we lose, what are the best practices, and you can have a look at this. This year we're going to continue. The title of the presentation seems that we are talking about super marketing. We want to sell you something. No. Yes and no at the same time. Please listen to the end, and then we shall see what happens. What are the questions that we're going to answer? It's questions about what is open source analysis throughout the life cycle. And colleagues, can you invert the slides? What can we do throughout the life cycle? How long do the checks take? Life cycle. What does it look like? Software development life cycle. In open source, we have two complementary practices: point checks and composition analysis. Point checks, it's open source analysis. We look at different malware and bugs. And second stage is locally conveyor checks, local checks, and elimination of vulnerabilities. What about the life cycle? Let's compare. Let us see where they exist. Development process can be varied. We have good people, not very good people, security specialists, different pipelines. At each corner, you see some surprises, and you have to deal with them and take them into account. When we talk about modeling of something, of anything, we have to understand the overall structure. What you see here is dubious. We can hardly reach that level. What are the stages of checks? We have a local environment, developer, tester, and so on. Everything which happens locally. We have the second part, conveyor, where we can check open source at three stages: composition analysis of source code, composition analysis of builds, and binary composition analysis. Some people think differently about, so at pre-build, at build, and at post-build, we check the code. And then when your software is ready, software build of materials, and then you check how it works. The release is ready, you run it and see, are there any new vulnerabilities that you didn't detect before. Let us go into detail into OSA and OSA.
Значит, что такое ОС?
OSA, what is it? We don't want to import anything bad inside our development perimeter. Malware, vulnerabilities. When we develop a clean repository, it cannot be always clean, but some people believe that you cannot use any external components where a vulnerability is suspected. It's too harsh. So developers are limited somehow, and developers can revolt, and you can get a wound or a hit in your cheek. So we check the packets, you check the images, and security shouldn't impede development into such a way that developer should suffer at each stage of development. Composition analysis, of course, it's foundation base. Components are checked in the process of development. You have inventory, check and action. Security policies, implementation. So at each stage you can check your code with different level of harshness. All parameters of analysis and depth of analysis should be such as everything should be efficient. What are the parameters in composition analysis? If any analysis tool is such that you have a lot of parameters, each parameter can be analyzed in a different way. You can check only manifest, or you can go deeper. You can check with transitives. You can use different vulnerability checking methods, and everything should be under control. And the main tuning tools are different policies of security, depth of check, transitivity, reachability, and a lot of other things, and the volume of the database, which is used for composition analysis. Tomorrow we have one more presentation about the same thing. In BDU, we have some vulnerabilities that have not been seen before. And if you are not friendly with BDU, you can miss those vulnerabilities. Now let's see the funnel. We're not going the marketing to build the marketing funnel. I drew the following thing: analysis of all our vulnerabilities, and we try to look at the stages or phases. We have a funnel of vulnerabilities, and at a certain stage, source code, images, we have 100% of vulnerabilities. Of course, we have a lot of different things here, and sometimes it is not necessary. 90% goes to runtime. It's on average.
у 66% от общего числа, то есть
66% of the total
поправить проблему через
can
обновление.
be
Мы не говорим о
corrected
том, что у вас
through
может быть старая
updates.
компонентная база или что-то
Of
еще
course, you can
подобное.
have an old
И
component
что такое
base,
обновление, здесь тоже можно спорить,
and
потому что обновление
what
бывает
is
как
an
апгрейд,
update.
так и
Updates
даунгрейд на
can be
самом деле.
different. You
И
can upgrade, you
дальше,
can
если у вас это все
downgrade. It's
хорошо, у вас
also
есть
a
соответствующий
change
инструмент,
of that
вы
kind. If
можете
you have
проверить
all the
достижимость
appropriate tools, you
юзабилити.
can
То
check
есть у open source
reachability.
сейчас такие решения есть, в том числе,
We have
то
open
есть
source
для
tools
стран.
for that,
И вы можете проверить
and
достижимость юзера
you can
методов
check
для десятка, там, до
reachability of
10%
methods,
того, что
and
у
in
вас было, вы можете сказать,
10% of the
то
cases,
здесь
you can
удостижимый
say,
метод, здесь
well,
недостижимый метод. Окей, идем
this
дальше. У
method
нас
is
получилось
reachable, this is
66% юзабилити
unreachable,
только
and
за
we
счет
get
вот этой нагрузки. Едем
6%
дальше. Есть
of
нюанс,
the vulnerabilities
который
left.
следует подсветить.
There is one thing that we have to
Возможно,
stress.
его надо было подсвечивать не здесь, но я почему-то решил, что
Perhaps not
здесь.
here, but I decided to
Есть у
do
нас
it
такой момент,
here.
что достижимость вам
For
показала,
example, if
что все хорошо и уязвимый
reachability
метод достижим. То есть
showed you
вам
that
требуется
yes,
обновление.
this
Но
is
есть
possible,
такая
you
особенность.
need to
Не все
update, but
обновления одинаково
not
полезны,
all the
потому что это
updates
тоже
are
достаточно очевидно
equally
для
useful.
рядового, скажем
It's
так,
obvious
апсека или ИБшника,
for
что
a
через
rank and
новое обновление
file
может приехать
IT person.
какая-то новая
Some of the
функциональность
updates
еще. Ну и,
can
соответственно,
bring
начинается
you
веселье с
in
обратной
new
совместимостью, проверка
functionalities.
тестов,
What about
проверка, что у вас
reverse
все красиво и работает.
compatibility?
Поэтому здесь придется
And
потратить времени побольше.
we have to
Но
spend some
5% мы
time
справляемся с
here.
ними не глядя, и у нас все чинится, и все
So,
хорошо.
but in
Но есть у
5%
нас
of
другая
cases,
ветка.
everything is
Это
corrected.
все не влезало у
But
нас
there is one
красиво
more
на слайд.
thing.
Значит, нельзя поправить какие-то
You
уязвимости
cannot
путем
correct
обновлений. Таких
some
штук у нас в
of
обороте
the
24%
vulnerabilities
остались. Значит,
through
что с ними
updates.
делать?
24% on
Ну, что
average.
мы делаем?
What do we
Scoring
have to do
классический, то
here?
есть смотрим на
We
какие-то
do
числа
the
векторов, мы
scoring.
смотрим там на
Look
возраст,
at
на актуальность, на
vectors, look
наличие
at
потерь, на наличие
age,
эксплойтов,
patches,
и же с
exploits,
ними, да, то есть
and
или
so on
аналогом,
and
да,
so
или
forth.
накручиваем этот скоринг самостоятельно. Соответственно, мы
We do
получили
the
такую
scoring
estimativку, которая вы
ourselves,
можете скинуться до
and
8%
then
как бы проблемок, которые
you
вам
can
придется разбирать все-таки
decrease the
вручную.
number of
Итого у нас на этом
vulnerabilities
случае
to
они сходятся в одно,
8%.
и у нас
8% you have to do
происходит тот самый
manually.
логический тряж и исправление
Uh,
выявленных проблем. Итого
and you have to
9%
correct all that. So
уязвимостей
we
стало
had
еще на 10%
100%,
уязвимостей чисто за счет вот
now
этой
we get
накрутки. Но здесь
14
важно понимать, что, опять же, в чем
due
отличие
to
этой схемы,
previous
которую я тоже
cleaning
пока не
tools.
считаю там какой-то там каноничной,
This is
в
not
чем проблема? Часто вам продают какую-то
obvious,
воронку, говорят,
not a
что
necessary skill.
вот, значит,
Often
у нас
they try
уязвимость,
to
вы
sell you a
запустили какую-то
funnel.
логическую функцию, стало 1%
We have
уязвимостей. Вот, разбирайте. Это стандартно. Моя
vulnerabilities,
задача показать,
go
что
through
вот
this
есть несколько
funnel
путей,
and
через
get
которые можно будет
1%
пройти и
as a
в том числе
result.
с точки зрения вот этих
No,
накруток.
I show you in detail
Вот,
what
да, здесь
do you have
такие
to do
средние
to
выводы по
go
больнице, что
down to
эффективность работы SBOM можно
14%.
накрутить за счет разных ручек,
SCA
за счет разных
efficiently
теорий
can be
в
improved
теории.
by
Да,
5
то
to
есть есть
10
научные
times.
статьи, и все проверяют, что для
Theoretically,
того,
there are
чтобы
some
чисто и красиво
scientific
делать
articles
обновление,
about that.
можно
If
даже
everything is
стопроцентно
okay,
эффективность
you
скачивать
can
только вот
reach,
там
if
то ли
you
вот,
can
то ли вот
boost
это обновлять, то ли
efficiency
вот это обновлять и
by
так далее. Но, к сожалению, это только теория, потому
100%.
что есть
Do
куча
this
всяких
and that, but this
особенностей,
is theory.
что пакет
Of
уязвимый,
course, there
потому
are a
что
lot
у вас
of
там конфиг какой-то
subtleties.
кривой. Или
Sometimes you
потому
have
что
a wrong
ассоциирован уязвимый, когда он
config
с
and
каким-то
something
другим
else,
конфигом.
or
Poor
a
config
config is
or
different.
mismatched config,
It is used with a different
configuration applied
package
to
and
different
so on.
package.
Ну, то есть там еще надо
The
позаниматься,
content of
поэтому
security
без
patches, you
супероптимистичных
need to look
каких-то
into this
историй
as
по
well.
поводу того, что у нас
So I
все
wouldn't be
будет по
too
автоматам,
optimistic
я рассказывать, по
about
крайней мере, сегодня
complete
не буду.
zero-touch
Разберем стадии.
automation.
Давайте теперь
At least not
пробежимся по
today.
стадиям, поговорим про их особенности.
Let's now
Да,
run
какие
through the
стадии в
stages
проверках open
and
source
dwell on
вас
each
примерно
for a
ожидает
bit.
и что
What
там
stages are to be
проверяется.
expected
То есть вот
when
наша
you
схема, мы на нее сегодня уже
validate
посмотрели. Вот
or
у нас
check
есть защита
open
цепочной
source?
поставки, назовем ее так. Да,
We've
то
seen
есть
this
когда вы
flow,
проверяете то, что у вас условно
that's security for your
и у вас есть
deployment
композиционный анализ на разных стадиях. То
chain.
есть когда у вас
You have OSA and
работает
SCE.
в локале и в
The
конфиге. То есть все
supply
проверяется,
chain or delivery
если
chain
вдруг случайно там вдруг не
starts
выпадлит конфиг
locally
или какая-то
through
особо
conveyor
уязвимая
through to
configuration.
deployment
На пострелизе у нас защиты цепочки поставки по факту нет.
to prevent against
Упаковали пакет продуктов,
vulnerabilities
и у
or
вас уже
malware.
ничего
It's
не происходит.
not present in pulse deploy.
И вы можете контролировать, что там.
You have SBOM, and you can monitor it
Анализа, опять же,
within.
стадии я их уже ранее озвучивал. Давайте теперь по ним по всем пробежим.
So these are the stages of SCA. Let's dive into each of them. But we start with OSA. Do not choose vulnerable packages, obviously. You don't have to apply OSA to all transitives.
Это наша основная история.
You need to check for malware.
Знаете, что у вас пошло не так. Разработчик в локале что-то...
And you'd always know what's wrong. If there is a developer who addresses something locally, they get stopped, and then you have to explain the alternative, what's secure. If you don't check it locally, then it's the same on the conveyor stage. Check and correct, but it's much harder to do this in conveyor. You need to read the logs, read up the recommendations, some analyzer tool, and only then you can do the fix. It's much more back and forth, so it's easier than locally. The main thing here is to not to tighten your policies too much. SCA can be done in your IDE environment, or it can be an agent that's integrated there. It can be just separately in a console locally. This is the stage to make sure that it's all good. And it's even better if this is done in line with corporate policies. Here is the project, here is the context, here is where you run it, here are the security policies. You run the check and you see that some components need to be swapped. To not postpone it through to the gate. Not pitching your shift left per se, but I kind of do. The developers have done all the checks. It all checks out. Policy compliant. What could even go wrong? Well, if you have a long cycle, vulnerabilities will still creep in a week or in a month, so it can come back to bite you. Or this can have to do with the systems packages, because they can be found in different processes across different companies. Golden images, separate unit for these images may be the case, different processes that you need to orchestrate. It's a major source of trouble. If you don't have this practice in your company of security champions, local checks, you'll start doing this at the stage of source SCA. It's pretty much the same. Automated tools that are linked to the conveyor or repository. You check for external components. You get a return from this tool. But it's not done locally. That's the catch. It's somewhere else. You have to knock on the door. It's a different team. They have their own DevOps or AppSec. It can be a long journey to get this. Sometimes it's just one guy doing all this, coding, checking, and deploying. But it doesn't always work like this. Then you have checks at the build stage. You have your source code. You've checked it. It's clean. But then on build, the environment can be different. Package manager can be different. There can be a new dependency from some weird script, which redoes your composition again. A different package manager could come with a new algorithm or selecting transitive dependencies, unless you've fixed them. You change the manager, and 30% of the packages now have a different version. Any organization would have more than one team, and different teams can use different versions of the manager, different notations, and it's a big gap in your security. Moving on, though, we have past build. This could be binary SCA, but this is not clearly defined even. Sometimes people call JR a binary. It still hits me close to heart. Did you compile an archive or an executable or a Docker? Dockers are sometimes called binaries. You have to decompose it into layers. Yes, and you have to present it. When you're doing past build, the thing to look for is, again, new additions. At the very last step, you could have a dirty container get in. It's a fail, you have segregation of responsibility, it's a waste of time, so this needs to be monitored closely. This is also the stage where some people try to bypass composite analysis, different schemes with images and so on. That's just to get to prod faster. It causes delays, and this stage is actually important. Needs to be split and clean. Next step is SBOM. That's more like maintenance. You're not a developer, it's fine. You'll have this at any rate. You get a delivery from the supplier of a bill of materials, and you check the components against it.
С этой стадии могут и будут возвраты абсолютно точно, и мы сегодня об этом будем говорить в конце.
This stage gives you issues as well. There can be reverts. We'll get to it as well.
Лежит в полях.
The basic idea is that you have your software running somewhere, being executed, and it takes on different vulnerabilities. Sometimes you need to deploy a new release once it has gotten to a critical mass. If you have your eye on this, you can bring value to the IT service to better configure their release cycle. Preliminary observations. I got messaged in the chat after some conference that the tools banned React, which was really challenging. But it's dealt with really easily. Configure your policies properly. SCA tools are not responsible for the policies. That's the fine-tuning that I mentioned. You fine-tune these knobs, these parameters that are set by the users, the AppSecs. Useful values or numbers. Let's dive a bit deeper. We'll get into modeling as well. I'll restate something from last year as well, because it's really important. And then there are some new things that we have this year. Dependencies, values, statistics, vulnerabilities across projects. Here are most popular, common languages. If it's JavaScript, the dependencies are many, almost 500. I saw 15,000 dependencies in real life. You can deal with it, but then recertify your developers, right? Other languages, Java, C#, Python, dependencies are fewer, but there are still some vulnerabilities, as you can see to the right. The last column to the right is the vulnerabilities to monitor. You cannot eliminate them, but they're manageable, they're unreachable. You're on-prem. There are different things. 23 minutes. That's how long it takes to do one triage exercise, provided that you have experience. That's in your own context, your own code. That's to analyze one open vulnerability. It's a rolling statistic that we are monitoring. We have analyzed 10,000 vulnerabilities by hand, so we have an idea of how long it takes, fortunately or unfortunately. If you're new to it, your bench would be 45, 50 minutes, and then you'll get quicker at it. If you consider yourself experienced at analysis, or you have an experienced team, you can aim at 23 minutes. But then there's multitasking, smoke breaks, and so on, so let's make it an hour. Up to 86% of vulnerabilities are found in the transitive, but there is a catch, as always. A bit of myth busting. Reachability through open source, for example. That's great, but it's only for the directive. We'll need to do this in transitive dependencies as well. You need to check for reachability because that's the main source of the problems. And most of them are usually on the attack surface. Again, that's where you have to get it spitting clean. 100, a nice round number, 100 vulnerabilities per year emerge on average across all languages in a given software, unless it was updated for security or package versions. If you were to do nothing for a year, you'd have 100 new vulnerabilities. Get on with your analysis. It's okay if you have just one project, but if it's hundreds or thousands of projects, this can get tricky. Another curious statistic. During development, over a year, you'll have additional 20 to 30% of vulnerabilities. If you keep them tracked, it's all right, you manage them. But there are different skill levels. If it's an average, if it's a startup, people use a lot of different components, and then the security person comes in. A lot of questions jump at you. How to do this, how to manage it, and then you just do the verification. Another stat, 26% of fixes, according to our research, are not purely security updates. 26% of fixes are not pure security updates. You cannot plug this value into your development model. You cannot rely on such fixes. Once every fourth, you'll have to dig into the code and double-check its quality. Out of the 26%, half is that new functionality is crammed into functionality. This can be huge PRs that break your dependencies with libraries. And then sometimes there are half-baked fixes. There is a vulnerability, it's addressed, but partially, it comes up again in a year, flagged by researchers. This is something to keep in mind as well. And this takes time, which is our most valuable resource. Back to shift left. When you do your selection at the early stage, where your developers shift left and do the checks locally, the vulnerabilities take 1 to 10 minutes each. It's a big success at an early stage that will make your life easier at the conveyor stage. You will not have to
Как вы думаете,
be as upset.
какая может быть модель
Now, the model,
из всего
what could this be?
вышесказанного? Можете выкрикнуть.
What model can we come up with from the above? Spiral-shaped, waterfall, agile, what's the approach? Incremental development, any buzzword, RUP, throw something at me.
Все AppSec сидят.
Oh, okay, we have a whole room of AppSec experts.
Никакой модели на самом деле быть не может.
There is no model there.
На что мы
That was a bait and switch.
на частоту развертывания.
But there are things to focus on. The frequency of deployments.
Мне кажется, у каждого
You need to monitor your cycles. Each AppSec specialist needs to have a dedicated app to monitor their development cycles. That's your foundation.
Почитать про Россию на State of DevOps Russia.
You can refer to State of DevOps Russia, and it'll say again, monitor how frequently you do releases. If it's more frequent than once per quarter, it's highly likely that it'll get bounced back.
Разработчики уже не помнят, зачем они.
The scans will give you flags. Developers wouldn't remember what their dependencies are. It will require updates. It gets on your nerves. It takes time, which boils down to money. And that makes it harder to control the security of apps. When you have several releases out on the open, this can be especially relevant in certain types of software. If you have frequent releases, you have proper monitoring, you're tracking all the things that need to be tracked. You can keep in touch with the development. If releases are infrequent, you lose connection, things fall by the wayside, get postponed, pushed to tomorrow, which is no good. If you are ranking as an elite team or a high-level team, then your security will be okay. If you fall into the medium or low category, well, you see it in the slide. You'll most likely have issues with development, and it will generate a lot of frictions. You'll spend time on sorting out the reasoning behind each component, the compatibility, and so on. What do we hear when we say development? New features, new deployments, but sometimes developers get this post-deploy reverse. It can be different for different companies. If you have 15,000 development dependencies in JavaScript, you get issues from post-deploy pretty often. If you have just 100 components, it's much less frequent. Again, on average, do nothing scenario, you get 100 new vulnerabilities per year. Just divide it mathematically. You have 25 vulnerabilities per quarter. Very theoretical, but anyway. If we have the fixes ready, we have reachability. It's 2.5 per quarter, 2.5 vulnerabilities. What we've heard many times from the AppSec gurus. 2.5 vulnerabilities per quarter is negligible in terms of time. I could triage them while I was speaking here on stage. You have clean releases, you monitored it 3 per quarter, 10 per quarter. It's not a big difference. Yes, you can have many different projects, different languages, but that comes down to your governance system and your relationship with the AppSec department. So More frequent releases are better. More releases than once per quarter. It appears self-evident, but not all people recognize this. And then you can have many releases out in the open. You have 10 products. It's your live landscape. You have code scoring, and it's out there, customer side. We are phasing those out gradually, based on new functionality and based on the obsolescence of components, which comes with accumulated vulnerabilities, the vulnerabilities of the reachable kind. When you have more than 2 releases, not just one, it's exponential, the complexity of things. It's not linear. You have to manage the patches, you have to mind the compatibility. So you have to recognize this. Systems packages are a whole different story. I focused on basic development today. Systems package and Docker, again, merits a whole separate discussion. The models and approaches would be different. Packaging and Docker can be very different. Different units can be responsible for this. They have different views on developers and AppSec, DevOps. So we'll be addressing this at some other date. Which brings me to my conclusions. I wasn't too technical today. I have saved this for tomorrow. So let's start with the fundamentals and end with the fundamentals. Have insight into your development processes and have proper justifications for IT as to the frequency of releases. Explain to them what they have to do to be secure. Again, shift left. Let's not go there, but it's still on the slide. Run calculations for your labor intensity. I've given you a bunch of statistics. Try and measure up against that. If you want some details behind these statistical outcomes, or even some joint research, you're always welcome. We are open to this. Again, do shift left. Sooner or later this happens as you mature. An ad plug. I'll be telling about Log4Shell tomorrow, a very technical presentation. We'll have fuzzing. It's 3 p.m., I think. I'll be there as well. Thank you for your attention. Do rate my speech. It's useful for the organizers and myself. Right. I'll be taking your questions gladly. There is a book giveaway, I hear. It's a solid book, so let's get some questions now. Hi, thank you for your presentation. You mentioned fine-tuning of policies at the top of the presentation, and that OS's core is not as effective. So what's your take on the best approach to fine-tuning of policies? What should be upstream, what downstream? Has exploit, for example? Well, I have a separate presentation on this. Let me try and condense it for you. Secure development as a process that you start implementing needs to be rolled out smoothly. You kindly flag some mistakes or failures. You show examples: vulnerability, exploit, patch. Another time, vulnerability, patch, but no exploit. And you'll be resisted. Can this be exploited? What's the proof? So you need to ease into that. I can share my other speech with you after this one. Thank you, Alexei. Can you speak a bit more to post deploy? Something's out in the open. We didn't do shift left. So what do? Start from binaries? What do we do with SBOM? Do we need to dig up the source code and redo this? You need to have your SBOM in post-deploy. Let's say it's the stage before last. You have your post-deploy, you have the images, you have the packaged applications. That's your reference SBOM. You save it and check against it in post-release. Well, you need to make sure that it's not amended or modified. Just keep it in a safe or the versioning. You need to have traceability there. Hello, hi, thank you for the stats. We did this from last year, where we did the labor intensity exercise. Short question. What metrics are often omitted? Lines of code, pipeline, frequency of releases, but what else is there? What's your catch-your question? You can look at SBOM to see if something went wrong. You do SCA, you look at the age, 3 and 5 years, that's pretty obvious. Components are old, there is no updates, there is some development, and if the components are old, you're bound to have problems with security and compatibility. But then you have a high achiever manager who drives performance. They ask for some new feature, but it only works with a new library. And developers are like, oh, we need to update our components. Okay, can you do this overnight? No, half a year, which means that you will not have your new feature like that. Okay, thank you. One last question. Do we have the time? As the person who over-tightens the policies, I want to ask if it's easier to teach the developers to update packages and work with transitive dependencies. So what do we block? Malware alone or vulnerabilities? I like this idea. Is that true that code scoring in IDE can be really helpful? Okay, a product-based question. My presentation was general or generic. In the upcoming releases, we'll have support for IDE and you'll be able to see it there.
Алексей, привет, спасибо за доклад.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Alexei, for the presentation. You have focused on the SAOS cycle, but there is an edge case that you didn't address. If we assume a full life cycle with the entire supply chain, with all the dependencies, you have additional metrics. For example, if there is a dependency, there is an issue, but it's not out there in the databases. Type squatting, starjacking. How do you address things like that, and how do you automate it in the process level?
It can be solved at OS level, operating system level. Depending on the algorithm, you will have certain reactions. If it's not in the base, use more bases. Simple. If in PDU you have another, you don't have, you have such, you know about such crisis. So many vulnerabilities can be discussed for a year, but they are not in the base yet. So look at them, look at different pages. I can talk to you later. I have a question. How Do you solve the problem of binary dependencies? We have a surface and a driver. What do we do from the binary point of view? It's a very good question because not all the analysis methods work here. You can, of course, look at the driver itself, and if you have something in the known databases, you can work. It's low-level analysis. On the one hand, we can do this kind of analysis, and there are other kinds of analysis when we can go to binary codes and show the information about those codes. Did I answer a bit? Yes, a bit. I am just interested in it. Well, thank you. Anyway, at this point, I would like to close the Q&A session. Who is the winner? The best question is about... Yes, about the binary story. I didn't answer properly, but the last question was the best one, because the story with the binaries is underestimated. We have a lot of possible problems there, and well, the industry is not yet ready for appropriate security in this area. Please come to me and you'll get the book.